The first time I smoked was at around 15 years old, and I actually wrote a video about it called Poetry is Cool. I had vaped prior to that when I was like 13, due to the fact that I vaped accidentally on one that had nicotine in it, when I had been accustomed just to vaping with no nicotine in the liquid at all, because I liked the taste and I thought it looked cool. And I got a taste of nicotine from that. I wasn't particularly impressed. I didn't have any real noticeable effects. I mean, there was something slight there. There was something even less noticeable when I smoked for the first time, but it was kind of there, subtly, not really. And I vaped a few more times at around that age, 13, as well, without getting hooked on it, having any real interest in it. I didn't get hooked on smoking either when I first smoked there at 15, but I did smoke every now and again, usually just from having the person I got it from unknowingly supplying me. I picked it up off of them, but I was definitely never habitual, never smoking more than a few times in a week at the very most. And that was a lot for me. I would smoke maybe once a month, and sometimes less than that, for a really long time. And then I turned 18, and there was like a month where I was smoking I want to say 10 cigarettes a day. Well, it really wasn't a month. It was more like a week. And then for the rest of the month, I cut down to just a couple in a day. And then for years after that, I did not smoke at all. I picked up smoking again last year, in 2022, when I was offered some cigarettes by someone I knew, and I hadn't had any in a really long time. And it wasn't like an addiction formed immediately, or even slightly. I didn't really feel any habit formed at all. And once again, I noticed basically no effects from the cigarettes that I was smoking, besides negative physiological effects like increased heart rate, general discomfort in the body, needing to drink more water, that sort of thing. But no actual buzz. I thought it was just placebo. And so I didn't get into the mindset of being addicted to it or interested in it in any way. And that was years and years of my life where I basically had that mindset. And then a little bit later, I start smoking very regularly after I quit using all drugs, just everything. I had a lot of different stuff that I was switching between, and in one fell swoop, I was like, none of that, no more. And then I started drinking Monster Energy constantly. I would have 4 or 5 Monsters in a day sometimes, while smoking a pack or more of cigarettes in the same day. And I would do this because I wanted to have something around that felt kind of drug-ish to change my consciousness, but I didn't have drugs, so I just kind of went with whatever I had around me, which was cigarettes and caffeine. And I was taking this stuff concurrently just all the time to have even the slightest buzz, or even just the feeling, the mere feeling of ingesting something to alter my state of consciousness was very important to me in an environment where I was terminally bored, terminally unstimulated, and generally accosted and downtrodden due to the people around me. And that led me to want to use drugs of some kind, but I was limited in what I could actually use due to a self-imposed limitation. So I started smoking and having caffeine just constantly, way, way too much. But again, I didn't really get a buzz from it. The main thing that I got from smoking, besides being a shoo-in for other drugs to satiate my addict mind, it was aesthetics. That was the main thing that I got from smoking. And that was originally the reason why I picked it up in the first place. I thought smoking looked really cool in movies, in anime, in music, video games, in vlogs. I saw all of these people who looked really cool when they were smoking, and I saw the advertising on the packs of cigarettes that evoked these feelings of freedom and autonomy in me, because a lot of the advertising is specifically geared around that, and that advertising spoke to me both culturally and just as an individual person really deeply, because out of any desire I have, by far the strongest desire is autonomy. I desire freedom more than like anything else. I desire the ability to control my own destiny more than anything else. And axiomatically, I am firmly centered in the freedom camp. And so, just on an intuitive level, that kind of marketing speaks to me. And I fell for the propaganda, I think, because I came to see smoking as something that looked really cool. And so I took up smoking, and it was always basically for those aesthetics. It was never for the feeling the actual act evoked in me until, much later, years later. And it was never for the taste, or even though I came around to eventually liking the taste of tobacco, or anything like that, really. It was solely the aesthetic of being someone who was smoking. And when I went to the UK, the packages of cigarettes looked very different than the ones I was used to. There was this putrid gray color protruding from the packet, like it stuck out like a sore thumb. And on the covers, you had these eyes that were like decaying and looked as disgusting as possible, or like a charred lung. And it was like the most unattractive, unappetizing look for a package of cigarettes I have ever seen. Like, it looked just really awful. And it made me look at what I was doing and think, this isn't sexy or cool at all. Like, this is just kind of sad and an activity based in self-harm. And so it did not take me very long to quit smoking altogether after I got back from the UK, because every time I would smoke, even with American packages, all I could think about were those packages from the United Kingdom that had all of that nasty stuff on there. And I just thought to myself, I don't want that to be me, and I don't want an activity that I do to be in any way associated with that kind of look. It's a bad look. It does not look cool. And so prior to that, I thought the advertising and also the mysticism surrounding smoking by authors, propagated by authors, people in TV, people in music, I thought that mystique was extremely appealing, and that by smoking myself, I was almost like a weathered cowboy, partaking in the American dream of autonomy and self-reliance. But it turned out that I wanted actual freedom, not a boss that comes in a 40-ounce bottle of anything. Now, what I wanted was to be free of the mechanistic constraints of advertising, propaganda, and aesthetics, and especially the chemically induced temptations that ultimately stem from having a physiological dependence on nicotine. One thing that I shed after about a month of abstinence, it was gone, and I went back to feeling normal. I didn't have those withdrawals anymore. But the hilarious thing was, once I picked up smoking about a pack a day, like, I went from never getting any effects from nicotine, which was like in the beginning, to getting an effect when I didn't have it, which was just being depressed and extremely anxious. And after about a month, that went away, and I just went back to baseline. I was normal, and I haven't smoked ever since. But it was fascinating to me to have withdrawal symptoms from a substance that, in the beginning didn't make me feel that much. The weird thing is, nicotine gum actually made me feel quite a lot. Like, every time I ever had nicotine gum, it made me feel like almost like I was on a light opiate or something. It was so intense. But I also didn't like the feeling associated with it, because I would put one patch of gum underneath my gums or underneath my tongue, and I'd have the effect set in, and it tasted and smelled horrible. Like, I can both taste and smell it right now just in my mind's eye, and I feel a little nauseous just having that imagery in my head. But that part of it was awful. But the feeling also wasn't that great either, because it made you feel like you were kind of high. Like, it was kind of euphoric, kind of different, kind of interesting. But then afterwards, you would just feel so nauseous afterwards. And my first instinct was to take another patch, because I thought, maybe I could get back that feeling. And no, you don't get back that feeling. Your heart just races, and you feel sick, and you throw up. That's all that happens. And so that that was not an option for me either. And what I ultimately came around to was, like, nicotine is one of the worst drugs there is, and basically all of its routes of administration are awful. Vaping is the least bad out of all of them, but vaping is still awful because it's a way of consuming what is an awful drug. And so that's what I came around to on nicotine. It all started with aesthetics, basically, and then it ended with aesthetics as well, because the aesthetics that turned me off to it were just the aesthetics that are most likely predominantly associated with tobacco use in UK and other parts of Europe. That had been something that I was tangentially aware of from the news and from media, but it wasn't something I actually experienced myself. And that experience, more than any propaganda film or educational message, changed my tune. It changed my view of the drug and changed my habits. And now, for months now, I have been free of nicotine or any tobacco product for that matter.